And at the very, very bottom, it says, "From Atlantic LP, Led Zeppelin 3." And of course, this was not on Led Zeppelin 3. Hello, Robert John Hadfield here again from Audiomover. Got some really cool vinyl to talk about today. And I'm telling you, this one is so interesting. And true Led Zeppelin fans, I mean, if you're really a Led Zeppelin fan, you'll probably know about this already. This is really kind of an interesting thing that was put out when Led Zeppelin 3 was put out. Now, because there's more than just the one song on the one side. Anyway, this is so cool, and it's so cool. I don't remember when I got this, but I was so excited to actually have this when I got it. And you can see that it's kind of beat up, and it's it might have looked like this when I bought it. I got it a long, long time ago. But it was one of those things that I just kind of had to have. And you'll see why. If you don't know why, you'll see in just a minute what the point of this single was to get. And this is a Led Zeppelin song. Of course, on this side is the Immigrant Song. Now, what makes this really cool? There's a bunch of things. First of all, Led Zeppelin was not really a band that put out hits. You know, they weren't a band that were putting out a lot of singles. And they didn't do this a lot. They didn't put out a lot of 45s. I mean, and think about Led Zeppelin. You know, it's possible that your favorite Led Zeppelin song was never played on the radio, you know, at the time that they were popular. I'd imagine every Led Zeppelin song ever at this point's been played on the radio. But when you were into them back then, this was more album oriented. You know, I imagine when they put out Led Zeppelin 2 and Whole Lotta Love came out, there's no way they actually expected that was going to get played on the radio. The song was way too long. It had that really weird kind of middle part that just had all the different noises and screeching and sound effects but so they were really album oriented. This was about, you buy these records and you would have an experience with the album, not just with a song. And that was really kind of what they were all about. Now, they had put out a couple of different albums. They'd put out 1 and 2 before this had come out. That's what I was saying. So they'd put out Led Zeppelin 1, which of course was really big. Led Zeppelin 2 got even bigger. You know, they were so important by the time they hit 1970, which is when Led Zeppelin 3 came out, which is what this song was on. The Immigrant Song was on Led Zeppelin 3. And those of you that are Led Zeppelin fans will recognize, and now, of course, I was too young at the time. I wasn't even 1 year old, I think, when this record was put out, or maybe just barely one. Led Zeppelin 3 was kind of a departure for them from what they'd been doing. I mean, I got to be careful when I say that, because you could see elements in the first 2 albums that kind of showed up on Led Zeppelin 3. But for the people at the time when this came out, this felt like a departure. It was different than what they had done on the first 2 albums. You know, there was a lot more acoustic focus on this album, and it was just kind of different. And for Led Zeppelin, they wanted to do kind of whatever they wanted to do. You know, Jimmy Page was kind of this guy that just wanted to experiment and try things and do whatever he felt like doing. And Led Zeppelin 3 kind of shows that. Now, although there was a lot of this acoustic, you know, more melodic stuff that was on this album, they did have, you know, this one really, really hard-hitting song called the Immigrant Song. And if you're not familiar with the song, if you saw School of Rock, Jack Black, when they're driving in the van, it's such a great scene. They're driving in the van, and then the Immigrant Song starts, and the reaction, watching the reaction of Jack Black in that movie, along with the Immigrant Song. If you're a Led Zeppelin fan and you love the Immigrant Song, you actually could almost relate. You could relate to what he was feeling in that moment. You know, he was of course acting, but Jack Black's actually into this stuff. And you could just picture yourself in that van like, yes, that song, it's so awesome. And watching him react to that in that moment, boy, he just had it. And, you know, by the way, if you've never seen it, you know, Led Zeppelin apparently is notorious for not letting people use their music. Jimmy Page has been very, very cautious with their legacy. And so that's his full-time job, is just managing Led Zeppelin's legacy. And he's very careful about where those songs will be used and how they're used. And so apparently and Jack Black even talks about this in a video I'm about to tell you about, how they're notorious for not letting people use their music. Well, Jack Black wanted this song in the movie School of Rock. So what they did is, when they were shooting one of the scenes with a big crowd, they made a video where Jack Black literally begs the guys in Led Zeppelin to let them use the Immigrant Song in the movie. And if you've never seen it, you should go watch it. It is just so cool. Watching Jack Black, he names them each by name: Jimmy Page, Robert Plant, John Paul Jones, Gods of Rock, or something like that. We need your song. You got to see it. It's really cool. Because Jack Black, once again, he's a fan of this stuff too. But so they managed to get the Immigrant Song in that movie, and like I said, if you saw that scene, you could feel that. You felt that at some point, because this song is so awesome. And the song is kind of this. It has this Norse mythology thing to it. And apparently it was actually written, the idea for it was written when they were in, I believe it was in Iceland. And that's where this whole thing came from. And it's just and it's one of those songs also that probably has one of the most misheard lyrics songs ever. I mean, I've looked them up because I've wanted to know what they're saying, and there's so few places that agree on what's being said. I don't know that Led Zeppelin themselves, the guys, have ever come out with an official thing that here's what the words are. At least if they have, I've never seen it. I think the record companies have put things out before, but some of the mystery behind lyrics is an important thing too to listeners, strangely enough. I saw an interview with Chris Cornell once where he was talking about lyrics. And he said something that was really, that I think was really important for the artists and the listeners of music. Because he said, there are some songs that I write, this is Chris Cornell, once again I'm paraphrasing. He says there's some songs that I write where the lyrics are literally meaningless. I don't have any point behind them. They just the words sound good together. And he said, I've had people come up to me and tell me that I was speaking directly to them and telling him what the meaning of the song is. And Chris Cornell goes, is thinking to himself, I didn't even have any thoughts behind what those words mean, and yet they had this deep meaning to somebody else. And then on the other hand, he'd have songs that have this real important meaning that just totally understood differently by the listener. And there's something about that too, to have these words, to not know what they are officially, that gives you this, that lets you even dig deeper into the song a little bit by, well, what do I hear? What is it saying to me? And this album, or this song specifically, has a lot of that stuff in it. Like if you listen, to the first little bits of the song, well, listen to the whole thing. There's so many parts where the way Robert Plant's voice is so, it's double tracked. You can hear the multiple versions of his voice. You hear all the reverb and everything, that it actually muddies it up just enough that there are parts where you go, did he really say what people say he said, or is it this? So it's kind of a cool thing to listen to a song like this, where you can kind of go, I am not completely sure that the lyrics everybody else is saying are really that. Anyway, so just kind of a cool thing. But Immigrant Song was produced, the production is so interesting, and if you've never noticed it, go back and listen to this. The introduction to the song, you'll hear kind of this backward that apparently is kind of this echo machine that they had. But if you listen really carefully, you'll actually hear the 3 and the 4 of the count off really, really faint. You got to turn it way up to hear it. But you'll hear the 4 specifically just right at the end, and then you'll hear, when the band kicks in. But a couple other things that are interesting about the introduction to this song. The very beginning of the tune, they hard pan Jimmy Page's guitar. In other words, it's only in the left ear. And if you've never noticed that before, go back and listen, because it adds this whole interesting dimension to it. And what I mean by hard panning, when you go to left or right, that's called panning. And when you hard pan something, that basically is just saying you're pushing it all the way to one side and not on the other. And so they hard pan his guitar to the left-hand side. So when it starts out, you hear the drum beat and then ga 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 da 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 da, and that's only in the left speaker. Now, the other thing that's kind of interesting, and this is a trick that's used by a lot of people in production, is you don't start off with the bass guitar. You do not have the bass come in until later. This is a thing that's used by a lot of bands, especially AC/DC, where you'll hear the guitar and the drums come in, but it's just the guitar and the drums. I think Highway to Hell does this, where you'll have the whole beat going and they wait to bring the bass in, because by doing that they can actually make the song add more energy suddenly just by leaving an instrument out at the beginning and then adding it later. So they'll leave the bass guitar out, and then when the bass comes in, it jumps it even further. So you're already adding energy at the beginning. You know, you have energy, but then if you wait on that bass, there's no reason to bring it in at the beginning. Wait, and then when you bring it in, boom, it hits you again, and you've got this energy. So they do that in this song, so go listen to it. The very beginning of it, it's just a drum and a guitar, and the guitar is not even on both speakers, it's only on the left. And then all of a sudden, then the bass kicks in, and it actually then gives you that other punch of acceleration. It's just a really cool production trick that helps the music just keep growing. Now, you want something else that's powerful. And if you ever question whether or not John Paul Jones is a brilliant bass player and artistic genius, listen to what he does with the bass guitar when they get into the pre-chorus. The part where it goes, on with sweep with threshing, the only go will be the western shore. When you get into that part, listen to what he does with the bass guitar. Because he's following what Jimmy Page is doing in the verses. Dun, da, 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 da. You can hear the bass, and he's just right on top of it. But when they get into that pre-chorus there, he does these runs. Just go listen to this. It's so powerful, and it adds so much energy to that part of the song. But you don't always notice it first off. But man, it's so strong. It's such a cool thing. Anyway, he was John Paul Jones. I mean, all these guys were great. They were so spectacular. Each one of them were masters at their craft, and it was just awesome. And this song, Immigrant Song, was just awesome, and it was different than everything else on Led Zeppelin 3. Led Zeppelin 3 was such a cool album, and every song on there, even though at first it had a lot of negativity from a critical standpoint, because it was kind of different. But I tell you something, over the years, that thing has proved to be as good as anything they put out, in my opinion. And that's the sign, this is a sign of okay, so bands who are successful, one of the things they have to do, they have to change. They have to master the ability to change over time. Because if they just keep putting out the same thing over and over and over, the fans really will get bored. And they'll go, okay, yeah, I get it, and then they just kind of leave you. So you have to change, but you also have to be careful how much you change, because the fans will abandon you for that reason too. If you come out with something that's so different than what they liked in the previous stuff, they'll abandon you. And this was actually pushing it a little bit. But the other thing is, though, if you change dramatically and it's really, really good, then people will stick with you. And another example of this, I think, that's really important in the world of especially hard rock, heavy metal, is Metallica. They had this dedicated fan base that was just growing through the 80s. And they get into the early 90s. I can't remember what year this put out. I think it was 90, 91, when the Black Album came out. A lot of their traditional fans really struggled with that album because it felt so commercial. But the reality of it was, and even though it was a little bit commercial, it was good music. It was excellent. So it wasn't as if they just abandoned this sound that they had developed and put out just junk to try to become more commercial. They actually put out great stuff, and as a result, they just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And most of the fans didn't abandon them. they might have struggled with it, but they stuck with them. And then they picked up this whole other generation of fans because the music wasn't a sellout in the traditional terms, like, well, we're just going to go make something commercial and then it stinks. No, these guys actually put something good out, and it obviously was good because it has stood the test of time. Here we are, 30 years later, and it's still, some of those songs are just classic, great songs. So anyway, that's another example of a massively famous band that changed or modified their sound a little bit and then maintained the fans and their status in the music industry because it was good. And this was the same idea. Even though they were changing what they were doing, it was excellent. It was fantastic music, and therefore it stayed. It had the staying power, and the band was able to keep going and going. But from what I've read this before, I don't know how true this is, but supposedly, the critical, there were so many critics of this album when it came out. Supposedly, I don't know how true this is. This is what led Jimmy Page on the next album to not even putting information on the album at all. Because you remember Led Zeppelin 4, nothing. There was nothing on it. It was just picture on the front and back of this wall, the guy with the things on his back and this kind of broken wall, and that was it. There was nothing on there to tell you who the band was. And supposedly this was kind of an overreaction to the way the critics had acted. I don't know how true that is, but just kind of an interesting thing. So anyway, but I told you that I was going to show you something really, really, really cool. And if you're not a big, deep fan, you may, or even if you are, you may not realize this. But what's interesting was not what was on the A side of this album, what was on side 1, but was on the B side. And that's why I bought this. It wasn't to get the Immigrant Song on a single. I bought this because of what was on side B. And this is something absolutely fascinating from a music history, rock history, especially Led Zeppelin history standpoint. I'm going to flip, so let me pull it out so I can show you this, and then I'm going to flip it over. A little dusty. But here we go. So Immigrant Song, Led Zeppelin, written by Jimmy Page and Robert Plant. And now I'm going to flip it over and show you what is so cool about this side. The song on this side, God, all this dust. The song on this side is Hey, Hey, What Can I Do? Hey, Hey, What Can I Do was never put on a Led Zeppelin album, and yet it was one of their big songs. The only place you could get the song Hey, Hey, What Can I Do was on the flip side of the single for the Immigrant Song. This was recorded during the Led Zeppelin 3 sessions, but it was not put on the album. The first time this was actually put on an album was a couple of years later. Atlantic Records put out kind of a sampler compilation. A lot of record companies would do this. They take a bunch of leftover songs or maybe some of the more popular songs. It just depended. And they would put these samplers out, these albums that just had a bunch of their artists, just individual songs from them. And they put this song on one of these samplers in 1972. And from what I understand, it was never put on anything else until it was released on a Led Zeppelin box set in 1990. And that was the first time it actually showed up as an official on a Led Zeppelin release after this. This was the first time that we saw this. This was the only time that we saw this as part of a Led Zeppelin release until 1990. So it was just cool for me to get this, to have this 45 that had Hey Hey What Can I Do on it. And so that's why when I found this, I don't know, this was way back when. It looks obviously Wax Trax in Denver, Colorado. I must have bought this 30, 40 years ago. But I wanted it just for that reason, because it was just, that was the only place that you could have this. The Led Zeppelin 3, the album itself over time, I think has gone, I don't know, it's sold something like 8 million copies. I mean, it's been wildly successful. And the fact that people know what, and this was recorded during that session, that's where I was going to go with this. So when they were recording all the songs, they had a bunch of extra songs that didn't make it onto Led Zeppelin 3. One of them, I think, made it onto Coda. One of them, I believe, they put on Physical Graffiti. Of course, this one was put on the flip side of this record. But this is a testament to the power of Led Zeppelin. That they had a song that wasn't even on one of their albums that still people everywhere know this song. They didn't even release it on an album, and it still became a famous Led Zeppelin song, just on the flip side of a 45. And you can see here that they gave everybody in the band writing credit on this one, rather than the flip, which was just Page and Plant. This was everybody that was involved with this song, and it's and hey, what can I do? It's such a cool. It's a great song, But it really did have that. It really was part of that element of Led Zeppelin 3 that had the more kind of country feel a little bit and acoustic. And also, this is another example of the brilliance of John Paul Jones, because this is where an example of him playing the mandolin, where you hear this mandolin part that comes in with at the beginning of the song with the acoustic guitar, and it's so awesome. I mean, it's so cool to have this. The song is amazing. Both of these songs, from An Immigrant Song to Hey, What Can I Do? I mean, this is such a cool thing. And like I said, Led Zeppelin didn't put a lot of these 45s out, so this was kind of a neat thing. One more thing that's really interesting about this 45, and it's what's written right down here. So of course, there's the name of the song, Led Zeppelin, and at the very, very bottom it says, "From Atlantic LP, Led Zeppelin 3." And of course, this was not on Led Zeppelin 3, which probably means that they had planned this or produced this or created this before the record had come out, and maybe it intended it to be on there, or who knows what. Maybe it was just a misprint. But it's really cool to see stuff like this where there's a mistake, and it kind of makes it a little more interesting to look at. If you like these videos, please like and subscribe. If you just sat through all that stuff, please hit the like button right now, and please subscribe. Whatever platform you're watching this on, please subscribe. And if you're not watching these in 4K, by the way, all this stuff gets filmed in 4K, and so some of these albums where we have the real artwork, make sure that your settings on YouTube are set to 4K. So you can see what we're doing. We try to focus these in the best we can. And in some of these, we put out a whole bunch of these videos, and we intend them so you can see the artwork very clearly. That's why we shoot them in 4K and post them that way. And also, if you like the stuff that we're doing, a great way to support us is go to Audiomover. And what the company does is we take old audio and videotapes and we convert them to digital. And most people have those things sitting around somewhere that they are going to lose if they don't get them digitized. And that's what Audiomover does. So go to audiomover.com and start an order. Or if you don't have old audio and videotapes that need to be digitized, I bet you know somebody that does, or one of your Facebook friends or somebody does. Just let people know about us. Post it on Facebook. Say, hey, there's this company that does analog to digital media conversion. Take your old audio and videotapes. They're called Audiomover. It's a pretty cool company because they make these videos about records and things like that. And so, just tell people about us. And that's a great way to support what we're doing here as we put these videos out. Anyway, hope you enjoyed that. Have a fantastic day.